In the spring of 1989, a researcher from Johns Hopkins walked into a farmhouse kitchen in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and began counting. He counted children. He counted cases of asthma. He counted allergies, autoimmune conditions, hospital visits. The numbers he wrote in his notebook that day would eventually become one of the most studied anomalies in American public health. Amish children in that settlement were developing asthma at less than a quarter of the rate of their English neighbors 10 miles down the road. The food on the table that afternoon, the same food that had been on Amish tables for 300 years, contained the pattern that the Hopkins team would spend the next 3 decades trying to decode. What the researchers eventually documented is uncomfortable for the modern American food system, because the foods that protect Lancaster County families are not exotic. They are not expensive. They are sitting on the shelves of every grocery store in the country, disguised under different names, stripped of the specific preparation methods that made them medicine. 10 meals, 10 preparations, 10 patterns the pharmaceutical industry cannot replicate and cannot patent. And by the end of this investigation, you will know exactly what is missing from your kitchen and exactly how to put it back. The Amish population in North America sits at roughly 380,000 people today, concentrated in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, Holmes County, Ohio, Elkhart and LaGrange counties in Indiana, and Geauga County, Ohio. These are not mystical communities. They are farming families who kept doing what mainstream America stopped doing, somewhere between the end of World War II and the rise of the supermarket. They kept their cows. They kept their root cellars. They kept their fermentation crocks. They kept the specific rhythm of meals that pre-industrial Americans ate for 200 years before the post-war food system erased it. Decades of Johns Hopkins research on Amish populations has documented what epidemiologists now call the farm effect, a measurable, reproducible pattern in which plain community children develop a fraction of the allergies, asthma, and autoimmune conditions seen in the general American population. The researchers found the pattern was not genetic. Amish families who leave the community and adopt mainstream diets lose the protection within a generation. The pattern is in the food, and the food can be reconstructed. The first meal on the list is Scrapple, not the grocery store version in the plastic sleeve, the farmhouse version. On butchering days in Lancaster County, families gathered to process a hog nose to tail, and what could not be smoked or cured was ground with cornmeal, buckwheat flour, sage, and organ meat, then simmered for hours and pressed into loaves. The result is one of the highest concentrations of bioavailable iron, B12, and collagen in the American traditional diet. Pennsylvania Dutch Scrapple is, functionally, a nutrient-dense organ meatloaf disguised as a breakfast food. It is the reason Amish women have documented low rates of the kind of iron deficiency, anemia, that sends mainstream American women to supplements and infusions. The second meal is chicken pot pie, but again, not the frozen version. The Amish pot pie, called bot boy, is a broth-based dish with hand-rolled dough squares simmered directly in the liquid. The broth is made from the whole bird, bones included, simmered for 8 to 12 hours. That broth carries glycine, proline, and glucosamine in concentrations that no supplement bottle on the market replicates. A single bowl of traditional bot boy delivers more collagen than a week of capsules. Lancaster County grandmothers made it every Sunday for 300 years. The joints of women in their 80s in Holmes County move with a fluidity that geriatric specialists in mainstream America rarely see. The third meal is sauerkraut, specifically lacto-fermented sauerkraut made in a stoneware crock in a root cellar. Never pasteurized, never vinegared, never heated. A single tablespoon of traditionally fermented kraut contains live bacterial counts in the billions. Penn State Extension has published guidance on home fermentation that confirms what Amish families have known since their ancestors arrived in Pennsylvania in 1737. that cabbage, salt, and thyme produce a food that rebuilds the human gut in ways no probiotic supplement has ever matched. Mainstream grocery store sauerkraut is cooked. The bacteria are dead. What Amish families eat is alive. The fourth meal is raw milk cheese, aged in a springhouse. The Johns Hopkins farm effect research traced a significant portion of the Amish protective pattern to early, repeated exposure to unpasteurized dairy. It is not the milk itself alone, but the whole ecosystem of raw butter, raw cream, raw buttermilk, and traditionally aged cheeses that Lancaster County families eat daily from infancy. The bacteria in that dairy train the developing immune system in ways pasteurized dairy cannot. Researchers have found immune markers in Amish children that look nothing like the markers in suburban American children of the same age. The fifth meal is chow chow, the end-of-harvest pickled vegetable medley that every Pennsylvania Dutch grandmother kept in quart jars through the winter. Cauliflower, green beans, corn, lima beans, red pepper, onion, preserved in a brine that is often itself lacto-fermented before any vinegar enters. Chow chow is how Lancaster County families ate 7 different vegetables in a single winter meal, long before the phrase "eat the rainbow" existed. The diversity in one serving is documented in traditional Pennsylvania Dutch community cookbooks going back to the late 1800s. Here is where the investigation turns. Because these practices did not simply fade, they were pushed out. Beginning in the early 1900s, federal pasteurization campaigns, consolidation of the American dairy industry, the rise of refrigerated rail shipping, and the post-war explosion of shelf-stable processed food systematically replaced fermentation with canning, raw dairy with homogenized dairy, slow broth with bouillon cubes, and home butchering with industrial meat processing. The Amish, because they held themselves apart from electrification and industrial convenience, kept the old pattern by accident of conviction. Mainstream America lost it by design. The food industry did not conspire to sicken the public. It simply found that shelf-stable, pasteurized, homogenized, preservative-laden food was more profitable than food that lived and breathed. And the human gut, the human immune system, and the human joint paid the bill. The sixth meal is Shoofly pie, and this one surprises people. Not the dessert version loaded with refined sugar. The wet-bottom Amish version is built on blackstrap molasses, which Pennsylvania Dutch families used as both sweetener and medicine. Blackstrap delivers iron, magnesium, potassium, and calcium in quantities that rival any fortified cereal. Amish grandmothers gave molasses by the spoonful to pregnant daughters, to children with pale cheeks, to elders with aching bones. A slice of real Shoofly pie once a week functioned as a mineral supplement for a community that had no pharmacy. The seventh meal is smoked sausage with apples and cabbage, cooked slowly in a cast iron pot. The combination matters. The fermented cabbage, the sulfur compounds in the onion, the pectin in the apple, and the cured pork fat create a digestive synergy that traditional Pennsylvania Dutch households used as a winter stabilizer. Amish families do not count macros. They eat patterns. And the patterns do work the body expects. The eighth meal is cornmeal mush, cooled overnight in a loaf pan, then sliced and fried in lard for breakfast. This is resistant starch, the form of carbohydrate that feeds the gut microbiome rather than spiking blood sugar. When cornstarch is cooked, cooled, and reheated, its molecular structure changes. Multiple studies of gut health have found that resistant starches feed the exact bacterial populations that mainstream American diets starve. Lancaster County families have been eating cooled, reheated cornmeal for 3 centuries without knowing the biochemistry. The biochemistry caught up to them. The 9th meal is bone broth soup with root vegetables from the cellar, parsnip, turnip, carrot, rutabaga, leek. The root cellar mattered. Vegetables stored in a cold, humid, dark cellar retained their nutrient density through the winter in ways that refrigerated vegetables shipped from across the country do not. A bowl of Amish winter soup in February contained more living vitamin C, more intact minerals, more enzyme activity than a bag of grocery store produce flown in from another hemisphere. The Lancaster County agricultural record shows root cellar use in plain community households continuing uninterrupted from the 1700s to the present day. The 10th meal is the simplest and the most overlooked. Fresh bread, baked in a wood-fired oven, from flour ground within a week, eaten with cultured butter made from raw cream. 4 ingredients: no preservatives, no dough conditioners, no seed oils. The smell of a Stoltzfus or Fisher or Beeler kitchen at 4 in the morning is the smell of the American diet before industrialization. That loaf, eaten with a slab of cultured butter and a spoonful of fruit preserves made from last summer's orchard, is what breakfast looked like in this country for 200 years before boxed cereal took over. Now, the practical application. You do not need to move to Lancaster County. You need to recover one meal at a time. This week, buy a small crock or a wide-mouthed glass jar. Buy a head of green cabbage and non-iodized salt. Shred the cabbage, massage it with salt until it releases its liquid. Pack it into the crock, weight it down, cover it with cloth, and leave it on the counter for 10 days. That is sauerkraut. That is step 1. Next week, buy a whole chicken, not parts. Cover it with water, add an onion and a carrot, and a spoonful of vinegar, and simmer it for 12 hours. Strain the broth into jars. That is bone broth. That is step 2. Buy blackstrap molasses and take a spoonful in warm water 3 mornings a week. Buy steel-cut cornmeal and make mush on Sunday to slice and fry through the week. Find a local farm, if your state permits, and buy raw milk, raw butter, aged raw cheese. Replace one industrial food with one traditional preparation every week for 10 weeks. And here's the final piece of evidence. In the traditional Pennsylvania Dutch household, none of these 10 meals were eaten in isolation. They were eaten together, in rotation, across the week, with bread at every meal and prayer before every plate. What Hopkins researchers kept finding, and kept failing to isolate into a single variable, is that the protection is not in any one food. It is in the pattern. It is in the rhythm. It is in the fact that a Lancaster County grandmother named Sarah or Rebecca or Anna has been setting that table the same way her great-great-grandmother set it in 1820. The medicine is the repetition. The medicine is the continuity. The medicine is the refusal to let 3 centuries of kitchen wisdom be replaced by a box with an ingredient list. This is what Lancaster County kept. This is what was taken from the rest of us. And this is what can still be recovered. 1 crock, 1 loaf, 1 bowl of broth at a time. Tell me, in the comments below, which one of your grandmothers kept the old pattern alive, and what was the dish that came out of her kitchen that no one else can make now? Name her. Name the food. Subscribe to keep this archive growing. The next case file opens a handwritten Amish herbalist's journal recovered from a farmhouse in Holmes County, and what it contains has been missing from American medicine cabinets for 100 years.